Hey team, good to see you. Say, we're going to have a bit of a chat about some books that I've read of late. I've read a few Warhammer books, quite clearly, right? And a lot of them have to do with things that I've been interested in. So, a bit of a cautionary note, there are some spoilers involved. So if we have a look, just firstly, I was interested in this one, okay? The Lord of the Night, okay? This one I found quite interesting. This is about, well, the Night Lords. And it was a good story, and again it's one that I was interested in reading a bit more about. I didn't know much about the Night Lords, I didn't know much about how they worked and all of those sorts of things, so I was quite interested with regards to it. It introduced an interrogator, and again I haven't read a lot of stories about interrogators. I did find that there was a lot of drama with regards to the interrogator that they possibly could have done without. And there was a lot of reveals with regards to the Night Lord, and then there were all the big battles with regards to the Night Lord, and it was good. It was good. I do think though that it wasn't really a story for me, and I think the end resolution of it, again without too many spoilers, the end resolution of it I didn't really like. I didn't think that that was a good way to resolve that particular story. I thought that it could have been a story where basically the bad guy's beaten again. I thought that that would be a good end to this particular story. I thought that they could set the interrogator Mita up as a character to keep an eye on for the future and her future battles with creatures like the Night Lords and the like. I thought that that would be quite a good thing to do. However, it doesn't quite end that way, and maybe that's kind of the point with regards to it, but yeah, isn't necessarily the book for me. I was also interested in our friend Belisarius Cawl, right, and his great work. I didn't know, again, a lot about him. Obviously, the Adeptus Mechanicus, I didn't know a lot about them. And this particular story I found really quite fascinating. This was quite an interesting one. It introduced the idea of, I'm trying to remember their name now, right, what are they called? Oh dear. Right, it introduced this new planet and the scythes of the Emperor. It showed you the battles with some Tyranids. There was quite a good introduction to Belisarius Cawl, and there's also a bit of stories about how he came to be who he was. All right, and yeah, so that sort of background I found very interesting, and what his motivations are, and the technologies, and what possible uses there could be for the technologies. So it is setting him up for more as the book goes on. But I did like the battles. I found that one quite an exciting one to read. I liked the Space Marine who accompanied Belisarius Cawl and the sort of the mystery surrounding them. I found that that's actually a really good read, that one, and obviously it sets up those scythes of the Emperor, which we see in the Space Marine 2 teaser trailer that has come out relatively recently. So those ones are all good. I did also read this one. There it is. This is about Constantine Valdor. It is an older one. It is about the time after the Thunder Warriors and before the Space Marines. And yeah, I have to admit, the thing I was really interested in is Constantine Valdor, who he is, how he works, his thought processes and adventures and stories with him. So I didn't find this one, again, particularly good from my point of view, mainly because it didn't really, it was a lot to do with him, yes, but it was also about that idea of him battling the Thunder Warriors and how we were going to beat them, and I didn't find that bit particularly interesting. And then it was, the new Space Marines and how they were coming about, and yeah, it wasn't perhaps quite the story I was thinking it was going to be. I would very much be interested in an actual Constantine Valdor story, so I'm hoping that there will be one somewhere, or one coming out at some point. Because I'm a big Blood Angels fan, I read that one. All right, Lords of the Blood. This is not one story; it's an omnibus, and that takes a little bit of getting into. I really enjoyed the sections of it that talked about Sanguinius. right? I really enjoyed the stories that it brought in, right? Discussions about who the Blood Angels actually were, how they were chosen, right? I enjoyed those stories, and it gave the origins with regards to Dante, right? Quite a good origin story for Dante, and his upbringing, some of the stories about him training and some of the battles that he had, and then it kind of flicked time-wise between him being a young space marine and then him being Commander Dante, having, you know, the great big battle on Baal with the Tyranids, you know, that sort of time period. I did find it a bit awkward because obviously it's an omnibus, so it jumped into different stories. So right near the end, excuse me, right near the end, there were stories about other Blood Angels, which was absolutely fine, but I wasn't as interested in the other stories of the other Blood Angels. I was wanting stories about Baal, I was wanting stories about Dante, and you know, it was really quite interesting, the whole stories of that battle with the Tyranids, all the politicking that went on. I found that really quite interesting. So that was a very good story up till near the end, when it did introduce a couple of other stories, which again, if they'd have been separate books with their own story, the lead into the characters, who they were, how they got on, and then maybe follow-ups, then yeah, I could probably enjoy those as well. But it just felt a bit of a jar and a bit of a jarring sensation to go from all these stories about Dante in particular to then just stories about some random Blood Angels on a particular planet, battling some issues that they were facing on the planet. It did introduce, however, it did introduce characters that I hadn't heard of, well, I'd heard of before, but I hadn't actually seen in their stories before as the bad guys, and I thought that was really good. That was very interesting to me. Excuse me. And of course, my favoritist of favorites, I say that, and there is a caveat, because this is the concluding book, right, to the Horus Heresy. This is the End and the Death, Part 3. So I've been waiting for this for such a long time before I actually ended up getting it. It was out of print for so long. The artwork on this is just amazing. I mean, just look at the artwork there. It's just incredible. Look at that. And again, likewise on the back, that iconic image. And it's a very good story. I do wonder though whether it needed to be a third volume, because it is wrapping up. It is wrapping up the stories from obviously volume 1 and volume 2 in the pathways. I loved the following the thread storyline and how they ended up, again, spoilers, I apologize, spoilers. They ended up following the thread, and then they got to the end where they were meant to be. And then it turns out that they needed to go backwards and replace the thread because they were the ones who put the thread there in the first place. They just didn't know it because it's, you know, basically time travel. And that was really interesting. I liked that plot line. I do think, I mean, I really liked a number of the characters. I did feel that they kind of wasted a couple towards the end, right? I mean, when Abaddon comes about, and I kind of thought that was a bit underwhelming. And then Abaddon is obviously under the thumb a little bit there too. I thought the battle between the Emperor and Horus was really quite interesting, and I thought that it dragged on for quite some time, interspersed with the other stories that were going on as well. But the actual end result of it, I thought was, yeah, that kind of made sense. But I did think that they had made Horus perhaps a bit overpowered in comparison to the Emperor. I do think that the Emperor possibly should have had more power than he ended up having. Again, spoilers. Yes, the Emperor does win, but he wins basically at the cost of everything, for his health and everything, and he ends up, you know, obviously the carcass on the throne. But it was interesting. And then the connection with Malkador, the Sigillite, all of those side characters with their own plot lines, there was some resolution with those. I did feel the resolution with Malkador, it was a bit sad, because he was a great character. I was really interested, and I'd be interested to see more, read more about his backstory and the things, the machinations that he's been involved with. I would find that really quite interesting. And the Grey Knights and some of their first arrival, basically. But yeah, in particular, the influence of all of these characters and all of the plot lines that came about, the battles with chaos. I mean, it's just incredible. You know, the re-emergence of Rogel Dawn, Vulcan, the last man standing, you know, these sorts of things. It was really, really quite interesting and really quite fascinating. The Sisters of Silence, I quite liked some of those characters. I didn't know that they did them much justice, to be honest, in the story. Gavriel Loken, I really like him as a character. And I thought he did well with his stories. And when there was that big battle with Horus and the Emperor, and then one of the things that was mentioned in the story is how it was going so fast that people couldn't even tell what was going on. It was like a blur. And then there was, you know, they were fighting across different planes of reality, and so there was interest, but there was also a little bit OP-ness about it. So I'm pleased to have read it, and I did really like some of the passages within it, and I enjoyed the conclusion of the story. I honestly didn't want to conclude the story. I wanted to, but I didn't, because I've lived with it for obviously 3 volumes now. So yeah, so very, very good story, and I fully recommend reading it just to finish out that particular story. I do think that there was room at the end to talk about Reboot Guilliman and him arriving, because he arrives right at the end of the book, and what does he find, and how does he start the process, you know, for the rest of the millennium, right? That is something that I'm now interested in. I'm now interested in finding the next story from this. How does Reboot Guilliman get on with things? How does he chase down the last remaining heretics that are out there? You know, what happens? I'm quite interested in that. I haven't gotten onto this one yet. This is on my to-do pile. This is about the assassins, and I am interested in that. I watched obviously Bricky's videos. Thank you very much to Bricky. And so he talked about the assassins, and that was what got me interested perhaps in finding out a bit more about them. So that will be one that I will read. It won't take me long. I'll read that in a couple of months, because I'm reading a few others at the same time. Right, so that's the books reading at the moment. I hope you have enjoyed the video. I apologize for any spoilers. Remember, all these opinions are my own. Feel free to have your own, but do have a read of some of these novels, because they are really quite interesting, particularly ones that interest you and characters that you might be passionate about. Thank you very much. Hey, Cornetta. We'll see you again.